So, John, just you and me tonight for the Common Gear podcast. Thanks for joining. As always, our good friend Lars is on vacation this week. He's reminding us that he's about 15 years younger than us, and he's on a cruise to the Caribbean with a couple of his buddies. So, I hope he's having a good time. And yeah, so this week, we had some vehicles that went up for sale that yielded some interesting results, and two of the three were really astounding. One of them wasn't as surprising, but the car had a really phenomenal backstory. So they all happen to be high-end touring sedans, if you will, and one of them is a little more of a sports sedan than the other. So with that being said, I'm going to share my screen and we can jump right into these three cars that at one time would have been, I guess you could call them middle of the road, high end, middle of the road, upper high end. But they haven't necessarily been cars that we've talked a lot about. And it's interesting to see the results that we saw. So the first one is a 18,000 mile 2009 Jaguar XJ Super V8 Portfolio that sold for an eye-watering $156,000. Now, I mean, this is an era of Jaguar that I feel like is undervalued for sure. I think the XJR is one of the most outstanding performance deals there is on the market today. It's basically a Mercedes E55 AMG for oftentimes half the price of a good one. And styling wise, I feel like this was a high watermark for Jaguar products in the last 20 years. This was just a great era where the design was definitely modern, but it's still called back to obviously the classic XJ profile and design. Now, I mean, you can go back and forth about the quality control from the kind of the Ford Motor Company years, but I mean, all that aside, this is sort of a limited trim model more than anything. 140 examples, known as the Super V8 Portfolio, which from what I gather is, you got the supercharged V8 and everything else was just sort of a combination of high-end features and options, and both the cosmetic and content type, in terms of what they added onto it to create the Super V8 Portfolio. I mean, this is a car that honestly I would look at as an attractive, again, I'm a fan of the model. I don't think I would have been thinking about it as a potentially six-figure car. And this is one of those vehicles that, in terms of the buyer, kind of kicks that whole notion of, as we talked about previously, the money laundering. I see people accusing bring a trailer buyers of doing this. This is a repeat buyer on Bring a Trailer who oftentimes bids to win. And I think this is just a case of probably the best example left of a car like this. Then he wanted to own it. And I'm going to come back to another point regarding just people of means and kind of what this purchase represents to them potentially. But I look at it as an unrepeatable price. Again, another Bring a Trailer vacuum, if you will. But at the same time, I'm not surprised, given it's a fairly unique car with the mileage and the options. So it's not my money, so it's certainly not something I would have spent this much on. But again, I'm going to come to a point about why it may not matter to someone in the right position. So what are your thoughts on this, John?
Yeah, I agree with you on a lot what you just said, Jeff. I didn't know much about the Super VA portfolios. I knew about the XJRs, I knew a lot about that, and this seems like a more like a fancier version of that car. This is as you said, 18,000 miles, one of 140 made for the US, 6-speed auto, 4.2 V8, 400 horsepower. So, it's a beautiful car. It's a really beautiful car, pristine car. The price is insane.
Yeah.
If you look at what else was out there, I was just skimming around. The last time a portfolio was on the market on either Bring a Trailer or Cars and Bids was in 09 with 71,000 miles. That went for $26,000 on Cars and Bids back in September of 2020.
Right.
This and we'll talk about the buyer. I was going to save him for this. I was going to talk more about the buyer during the second car.
Yeah.
But what's concerning is, and as you mentioned, like this is someone's buying this and they don't care about resale value. They don't care about the cost really, because as you know, Jeff, like Jags depreciate terribly. Like look how many XK8s you see on the market, for nickels compared to what they are. I don't know what the F types go for on this as used cars, but like XK8s and even like the XJs and XJRs, like they just sink in value. Like if you want to buy one, you want one secondhand after all the value is taken out of it. So this is wild. $156,000 for this car. And it's a beautiful car. I mean, but it's not $156,000. And it's funny looking at the comments on Bring a Trailer about this and another car we're going to talk about, where it's a combo of comments being like, congrats, and this is insane.
Right. Yeah. And there's definitely a deeper conversation I want to have about this. So I think we'll adjourn on the Jag and go into the second car the same buyer bought, and we'll expand upon it a little bit. So the same buyer and roughly, I mean, within the same day, I didn't even notice that he bought these cars on the same day. He paid $152,607 for a 10,000 mile 1995 Mercedes-Benz E300 diesel. So this is a W124 chassis, arguably one of the best E-classes ever made. Undoubtedly, my dad had a 95 E420, which was just one of my favorite cars growing up. It was a ton of fun to drive. It was quick. It was handsome. And, this really to me is a benchmark E-class that I don't think they've come close to matching since. So definitely, like I said, high watermark for this chassis, for this model. And the diesels were pretty hard to find. They weren't, I don't know if they weren't big sellers. They definitely didn't kind of repeat what the W123s did in terms of being just this, very high volume diesel model. So hard car to come across. The inline six, certainly 3-liter inline six. So it's got some decent grunt to it. So it's a diesel you can drive every day without feeling like you're in a penalty box of inadequate performance. And again, there's just this is I don't, no matter what model you're looking at in the W124 lineup, it's very hard to find one with this sort of low mileage, but especially in the diesel offering, which again just wasn't a very big seller. Now, so again, we'll go a little bit deeper into the actual logic of the purchase. This is the same buyer behind the Jaguar, same day of the buying that car, and he just again blew the roof off of what would be considered a typical price for this model. Daddy Longstick is his a very colorful name. And there's a comment I believe was made on one of these two listings. Okay, this one right here, which I just thought was fascinating. I actually sent this to my brother the other day and just kind of blew my mind. So this gentleman, Scott Ailes, is saying like, basically in a nutshell, if you think about how many, the idea of being a billionaire is not as foreign as it used to be, and that the current rate on a CD is paying 5%. If you have this money in your account, you're basically clearing more than most people make in a year in a day, just in interest. Now, I think one of the biggest mental blocks for people right now is, I actually had two colleagues send me, one sent one car, one sent the other one, and just like, oh yeah, it's money laundering. And you and I have certainly seen on like the Reddit forum, there's always someone claiming. I don't think we're giving enough credence to the fact that Bring a Trailer, Cars and Bids, they have like put on full display that these people have always been there. And now we're just seeing the transactional side of it, where we're getting a bit of a homework or a lesson in how much money some people have access to at a given moment. So, but it really does kind of cause a right brain left brain conflict for me, because I think I'm more open to that than a lot of people are, where I'm just like, yeah, there's always some people with a ton of money out there. Now we're just getting to see, um, how they spend it. And so, like, we don't even have a concept of, the way that they spend money and how easy it is to kind of write off 150K as fun money, right? Who cares if you ever sell the car for this much? That's not the point. Like, that's how, honestly, like this, it's kind of like this, the peon versus the landowner way of the serf versus the landowner way of thinking. Like, we have to worry about resale value, right? We have to try to like get our money back, or and then some, so we don't feel like we spent foolishly. Someone like this can obviously spend foolishly all day long, and it doesn't even come close to impacting their net worth. However, and this is where I still don't quite understand the bring a trailer effect, is I feel like most people I know who are of the means to have just crazy money to spend, they still generally don't like to spend foolishly.
Hmm.
And I know these same people out and on the South Shore. You certainly work with many of them, that even though they have the money, they still don't necessarily just spend recklessly. Like, they still have some eye towards value and spending what they think something is worth. So, I mean, I think this is just a whole nother level of psychology, where there's like another wealth class, where if you were invested in NFTs, if you were invested in crypto, I mean, it's just a way that the money comes in so much faster, right? You earn that money so much more quickly than someone who maybe is a developer who's got to wait years for the payoff, or I don't know, who builds a company from the ground up, and it takes 10 to 20 years for it to really start producing significant money. Whereas if you just invested in crypto at the right time, all of a sudden you're a billionaire in about 2 years. So what do you think? Who do you think's right? Who do you think's wrong? Is there a right answer?
There's a lot to unpack there, what you said. And I mean, we talked about this a couple weeks ago with that R32, and I think I used the term like bring a trailer is entered the Tyson zone, where like you can, if you message me, hey, this car went for this, on bring a trailer, I'd believe it. And this is one of those cars. Just first off, just I was skimming around like, all right, what's a comparable? What else? So last February, a 95 with the 92,000 miles went for 13 grand on bring a trailer. Like, I look at this car and I see something that I'd see on maybe a second-hand lot somewhere for like 15 grand. I don't see a $150,000 car. And, I want to talk about the buyer too. So one of the best parts about these sites is that you can see what these people bought. So looking at Daddy Longstick, which is a name for this person, like there's no better name. So we talked the Jag, we talked about the Mercedes. He also bought an 88 Audi 5000 CS Turbo Quattro for 14.3. You pulled them up right here.
Yeah.
That's Spiker. $500,000 Spiker C8.
Wow.
And then it gets crazy. He also bought an 87 Sterling for 14.
Holy,
it's like,
I didn't see this. This is wild.
Yeah, this is and then it's bizarre world. And then he bought the 370 mile Alpha, and then this Jag. Like,
I mean,
it's wild, but part of me wonders, like, are we gonna like see these cars listed in some type of bankruptcy or like criminal auction in 5 years time? Like, we're gonna go on Hemmings to see, or the Drive's gonna post like, hey, check out this crazy auction by this guy that like scammed people on like some type of solar deal or something.
It's so funny you mention that, because I don't know if you ever saw it. I always meant to send this to you, but there's a guy I came across down in Tampa who bought like 3 really low mileage Mark IV Supers. And I remember reaching out to him and they all came from a fire, like a fire station in Holyoke, Mass, that had been, it was a converted.
Oh, the drug dealer guy.
Yeah, no one
Yeah,
even knew those cars were in there until he got arrested or he died. Something weird happened to him. He died in custody or something bizarre
yeah,
went
I
down.
remember this now. Yeah, he died. I think he died in custody. Yeah, he was like he
Yeah,
had a bunch of like high end performance cars in there.
he had like the Fast and the Furious lineup in
Yeah,
low mileage time capsule condition, and no one even knew they were in this, converted mill building firehouse setup in shithole Holyoke.
yeah, I remember
And
this.
and so I mean, you're right, it does kind of have like that same vibe of like, oh yeah, in 2 years they're gonna crack open this airplane hangar and be like, oh, here's where all these cars went. And by the way, we have to repay the creditors, and nothing here is gonna sell for
Yeah,
what he
like
paid for them. It is sort of,
yeah,
and
it makes no sense to me. And you hit it on the head with like about like just people like just like cash rich like that. And I don't understand this buying mindset. I really like it's not like are you doing it just for the sake of doing it? Like, are you like, how are you
yeah,
justifying this to yourself? Are you just that wealthy that you can just spend it? And it's such a weird collection too. Like,
I
okay, I
know.
can like it goes all over the joint. It's just like whatever I kind of feel like that day. Like, oh, this is different. I feel like this. Like, are
Yeah,
you are you are you it's also like, are you a car guy who became rich, or are you a rich person who became a car guy or girl? Who
well,
knows what, let's just assume by the name Daddy Longstick it's a guy.
yeah, and I mean, look at the comment. Speak for yourself. I'm self-made. I have my reason. None of your business. Um,
Yeah, like
I mean, he's so he did address it. Um, and I mean, the thing that I don't really understand either is there's cars he buys for a reasonable amount, I would say. Like, I
yeah,
mean, the Sterling is still kind of goofy, but it's
the Audi.
probably both the Sterling and the Audi are kind of
The Audi's probably the best buy that he's had.
but what's interesting is if you look at the theme here, I mean, he like take the Sterling out. I mean, I'm sorry, not the Sterling, take the Spiker out. Then he's clearly buying the best examples of some not quite collectible, but interesting mid 90s European cars, right? So that if you strike the Spiker, everything else starts to
Yeah.
make sense where he's buying the best of a certain model. It's just that on the Audi and the Sterling, he
Mm.
paid reasonable money, and everything else he had somebody bidding against him that caused him to go way higher.
Jeff, let me ask you this.
Yeah,
So let's get back to the Merc and the Jag. Do
yeah.
you think these even go for 50% of that price on CMB? Or is this also
No,
the bring a trailer bump?
it's also the bring a trailer bump. It's I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal, which is about Randy Nonnenberg, the co-founder of BAT, and it was the interview was inconsequential, but the folks they interviewed who had bought cars on Bring a Trailer, um, it was really interesting to look at the psychology behind it, where
Mm,
there were like three people who had all bid way above what they thought they would bid for the car they ultimately won, and they didn't really, none of them really offered an explanation for it. They just were like, well, I, like, one guy said he's lost every car he went for up until that moment. Actually, the guy who bought the Tom Cruise IMSA 300
okay.
ZX, and he just finally, he said, like, I lost on 6 cars and I just went for it and, bid more than I ever have bid before. The other two were like literally like business school professors who just said, they trusted BAT in, without a shred of doubt. Like, everything was about the fact that they thought that buying on BAT would get them the best car possible, and that's why they bid what they bid, because they felt like that would, they were buying themselves like an insurance policy at the same time they were buying a car well over the market value. And so and that, to me, that's the slippery slope, right? Because we've started to see plenty of evidence of cars coming, as being misrepresented,
Hmm.
as not being nearly as good as people said they would, which is not necessarily a fault of that. That's just reality when you're buying an older European vehicle. But it does still kind of blow my mind that people still spend that kind of money knowing that that possibility is out there. But again, if you have more money than God, you don't really care about that. It's not really that big of a risk to you, I guess. Um,
Oh,
so
I
if
think, well, probably a lot of these people made their money on risk.
Yeah,
I think there was a study on like sports team owners about like their behaviors, and the reason why they were successful is because a lot of them kind of bucked against the trend and took on risk. So maybe we're seeing
that's a great
a
point.
version of that here with this.
Yeah, and again, these are people you and I wouldn't necessarily ever be close to in a transactional environment, right? We're not going to be, um, you know, speaking of real estate, like going to a home inspection against somebody who's spending this kind of money on a car like
Yeah.
this, right?
Yeah.
So we don't, you and I, and lots of others like us, this is another aspect of the bat effect where, again, suddenly you're in an environment where you're potentially competing against somebody
Yeah.
who is so far out of our realm.
Right.
And so, and that's the thing, like normally, let's just say that the best E300 diesel in the world goes for 50K. There's a lot of people who can play in that space, right? Mm-hmm. And who can write that check. So you've got a lot of folks who, we would run up against if you and I were going after a car like this. But all of a sudden, you talk about the bat effect. The bat effect, I think, should also be described as putting all of these same wildly different socioeconomic background into the same room for the first time ever. Which is something else we're not used to, where there's somebody who can literally just walk in and say, well, I just want to end it. Here's a huge number none of you are going to be able to touch for me to get this car. Again, I don't quite understand that because I've never wanted a car that bad, that I would just go absolutely nuts in terms of the final offer price. And, self-made or not, I don't think these are great cars to buy at this price. And I would like to think, even if you or I were at this level, we'd still be buying with an eye toward, well, this is a sound investment.
Yeah, and we talked about this in previous episodes. Is this going to cause? We talked about other people getting priced out of the market, because now everyone's going to a good chunk of people are going to think, hey, my 95 Merc, E-Class or my AMG version is worth X, where they thought it was worth maybe 40% less 6 months ago. So it's also kind of hurting younger enthusiast people that don't have that capital to get into the car game.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see that settle out at some point, because it's going to become more and more obvious you can't repeat this number in the private, the private transaction world. So as much as I think there's always going to be an afterglow, right, where people on Craigslist and Marketplace go out and try to get crazy money for a car like this, I don't think it's gonna peter out, where eventually people are just like, listen, if you want that kind of money, go sell it on back. Yeah. And they won't accept it because it's got ripped leather and questionable maintenance history. Well, then there's your wake up call. So yeah, these two are head scratchers. I mean, it's like I said, there's parts of me that say, yeah, go, good for them. There's parts of me that I'm just like, even with that kind of cash, I don't really get it. But I'm going to go to our third vehicle, because this one
just one other thing I want to mention before you go to.
Yeah.
So this just went to my head. I think it was on the car lounge. Someone said something about bring a trailer, saying that when Bring a Trailer started, you needed to bring a trailer because the car wouldn't run. Now on Bring a Trailer, you have to bring a trailer because you paid for this car so much that you don't want to drive it, and you're going to have it sit somewhere as a showpiece.
It's ironic and actually an outstanding point that it's like Bring a Trailer still works as a name, but it's done a complete 180.
It's not you, your buddy's truck and like a flatbed. No. It's now some executive line 18-wheeler coming to pick up your $152,000 Mercedes.
Yeah, right. Because again, that $30,000 enclosed transport bill cross country doesn't mean anything
Right.
at that point. Yeah, that's a great point, and I mean, kudos to Randy for flipping that narrative
Mm,
on its head in terms of where he is now. But yeah, just stunning result.
mm.
Now, our third car is one that I'm like this again. I keep coming back to cars and bids as being like the place where everything is normal because this was a great story. This was the
Mm.
2000 BMW M5, which you and I know is arguably one of the best sports sedans made in the last 30 years. It is still an outstanding car as a driver, as a performance vehicle. The E39 is perhaps the high watermark for the 5 Series in the United States. I mean, styling wise, proportions, everything about it. Clive Owen made this car an instant
I
icon.
was, that's what I had
Yeah,
my notes. Clive Owen
you
in
know,
the, with Madonna in the back seat.
right. I mean, this car for me is always when I see one of these, the first thing I think of is it coming off that on ramp with Clive
Let,
Owens, eyes
let
getting
me
wide.
see what
What
I
I
can
can
do.
do, just I mean, it's just such a it checks so many boxes. And this car, so Ammo NYC, as we know, is a Larry is the detailing hero of YouTube. He runs a great
Mhm.
channel. Very smart guy, very polished guy who has a pretty cool business model. But he was involved with finding this car, which had been left in a warehouse of some kind with just over what was it? Yeah, just over 23,000 original miles. It had there's probably a backstory there we never really got into, but regardless, it was,
Mm.
completely untouched with the exception of having, I believe it has a Bilstein coilover system, which again, that's one of the best coilover systems money can buy. And otherwise, it was most, I think it had one other modification that was easily reversible if you didn't like it. What was it? It had it had the European market headlights, which is
Mhm.
actually an awesome upgrade. So this car sold for 80,000, which honestly, to me, compared to what we just looked at, is a bit of a bargain. It's because this car is going to be worth over 100,000 inside of 5 years. I mean, you just keep it the way it is, and it's going to be a six-figure car. And so I look at this and I'm like, this is a brilliant purchase because it's probably one of the lowest mileage in existence. It's got a great spec sheet. The colors are
Mhm.
terrific. I mean, I think it's basically black on black with the Alcantara interior. And the modifications, as few as they are actually excellent upgrades. And then, as you know, Ammo NYC, always does. They brought the paint back to an absolutely ridiculous luster, and so you've got a terrific driver's car, a car with a time capsule grade mileage, but it's got enough miles on it that you don't have to really. I mean, you can happily add 3,000 miles over the next 10 years, and you will not affect this car's value one bit. I mean, there's just so many things about this car that made total sense to me. I honestly would have bid another 10 grand if it were me and not felt bad about it and still felt good about what I was getting in return. So I thought this was a terrific purchase. It's really one of my favorite sports sedans ever made. And I mean, look at this, it even comes with a set of BBS LMs. It's just Jesus. I mean, like if you do three things, this car it was, suspension, European headlights, BBS LMs. This is just such a great car, and honestly, I kind of start to laugh at the daddy long stick. Money or
Mm.
not, it proves it doesn't buy common sense
Right.
because this car would cost far less and was just a way smarter purchase. Anyway, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm in love with this. I am I this if you I had this down as my winner of the three.
Oh man, yeah.
I love these cars so much. This was an amazing era of BMW. I just think of this is the true super saloon. It's
Look at
this
this
is
thing.
up there with those the AMGs, and if you want to go to Europe, the Lotus Carltons. Like this is a
Oh
true
yeah.
rocket ship. The E39, as you mentioned, it's much loved. It's aged so gracefully. I think what also kind of helps it is that, what came after it, the E60, E61, the Bangle design, and that much hated, V10 M5 that came after it. So it's almost like that has allowed these cars to just really skyrocket. But, 23,000 miles for this. You mentioned this is a car you can take to Carson Coffee, put, a couple miles on it here and there, and it's still going to hold its value. This is going to be a 6K car at some point. It'll, for hell, if it was on Bring a Trailer, it probably wouldn't have been a six-figure car. But price wise, I mean, this is a time capsule, as you kind of mentioned. Other ones that are the other ones that are out there have over 100,000 miles, 160,000 miles. They're going for a lot cheaper. This is a 23,000 mile piece. It's fantastic. And jumping, and we talked about the bidders. So the other thing is, so I looked up the bidder, the winner of this car, who was like basically the complete opposite of Daddy Longstick, like someone who bought reasonable cars, awesome cars at reasonable prices. So he had he won a 95 Nissan 300ZX convertible. He won I believe I'm trying to think the other ones here. Yeah. 944 turbo for 25 grand in this car. Like cars that you're like, okay, price makes sense. And you could totally buy that. You'd want to buy that car and buy it at that price.
Yeah. I just pulled up his,
car auction. Scroll that. So look at that 944 turbo for 25 and then the Nissan. I mean, you would say right price, dead on. You're not thinking, what the hell is this guy doing?
And even the cars he's auctioned.
Yeah.
I mean, give it a sense of what he owns, and he's bought really very accessible drivers cars, great cruisers, enthusiast vehicles that have a following. And I mean, this to me, this is like this. I actually looked at this car. I didn't know it was him, but this NSXT was one of my absolute favorite specs in terms of colors and options. And here obviously a 993, which to me is obviously the high watermark for 911s. Yeah, I mean, this is someone who is
he's a car guy. This is a car person. Guy. This is a car person. This isn't like the other person we discussed. Like, this is someone that's passionate about cars, gets it, and knows like, okay, this is a good price.
And 100%. And he's staying. I think he's bidding. You can tell even just the way he bids is he's not going above what the car would likely be able to sell for if he was going to sell it quickly. So, again, I don't think there's any judgment here about how people spend their money, but it's more just there's a weird conversation happening where someone's like, well, I have the money, I can do whatever I want. And then there's also someone like, oh, well, I have the same amount of money, but I'm still buying cars in a smart way. And that is that to me is just, I don't know what you call it as far as like that's more appealing to me, or I certainly like it. I like the environment Cars and Bids is creating better, because I feel like there's more people like that where they're buying cars smartly. And as much as Bring a Trailer may be attracting the guys with bottomless bank accounts, I don't think it's attracting particularly smart collectors in some instances.
This was a smart buy.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
I'm gushing all over this car. I was so happy when you sent the lister. I was like, this car is just perfect. Like, it's there's probably not many M5s from 2000 that have that mileage on it, and if they are, they're sitting in a museum or at the BMW factory. I mean, it's just, it's a car that's going to continue to rocket, in value as we go for a long, as you mentioned, it's the high water mark of the M5. I mean, you still see them today. If you see one today, you're still overly impressed. Like, you can see the newer ones, you can see the ones with the big V10s in it, but this one's like the one that hits the sweet spot.
Right. Yeah, I agree. So we'll wrap up on this week of basically high-end luxury performance sedans with two absolutely insane sales on Bring a Trailer that defy description, and one, very, very smart buy on Cars and Bids of perhaps one of the best E39 M5 left in existence. So yeah, I mean, it's a conversation we're going to keep having. But I think at some point, as there's a clear area of reality here where it's like, okay, it's not money laundering, it's people with money, but it's not necessarily, it's making us realize that people with money don't necessarily have endless common sense. Like sometimes it is just a emotion fueled, no, is zero rationality purchase, and all we can do is kind of scratch our heads at it.
Yeah, we discussed this. We've discussed this a few times. Is there a bubble when it comes to cars? And also, what's the collector market looking like? I mean, for years, we had exotic cars. We had your Ferraris, your Porsches, and then, growing up in the US, you had your muscle cars,
Right.
And now we're kind of in this phase of like, okay, what's next? Because the generation of people that are starting to get that second car, that collector car, didn't grow up with muscle cars. They grew up with a real kind of wide schism of different types of cars out there, ranging from the Japanese stuff to the BMW that we're seeing today. Mustangs and Camaros, and there wasn't really a challenger for a lot of that time period.
And my final thought is, I mean, I agree with you. Like we may be trying to get our footing right around what's going to be a car that, I thought one of the more interesting things we talked about was the fact that, like with the E30, people may be moving on from that because they got tired of waiting for it to be more reasonably priced. But you look at someone like Jay Leno, right? And even with all his resources and the collection he has, I feel like what's interesting about someone like him is he's still buying stuff that I think he's got a pretty good read on is going to be a sought after vehicle. Like he is buying iconic, segment defining cars and trucks. Like he's buying things that had some engineering achievement or broke the mold in some way in the class of vehicle they were in. And that's what I don't see with some of these Bring a Trailer purchases. And Leno is someone who proves, you can have, as we call it, FU money, like where it doesn't matter. But you can still buy cars that make sense, and you can still buy at a price point that is looked at as a very good buy. And that's the thing about Bring a Trailer, is it's like showing this other world of people with a lot of money, but who don't really think about those components when making a purchase. And that's where I don't really get it, because again, I'm not at that level, but any car I own, I'm always looking at like, well, what is the unique feature? Or what is the sort of the thing that this vehicle does that few other vehicles have done as well?
What's the emotional attachment to it? It's not just the uniqueness, but you may have experienced a car like this in your past, or growing up you wish you wanted one, or it's so different.
And that's what some people were saying, that this Daddy Longstick guy is that's what he's buying based on. It is some interaction or moment he had with a vehicle that now he's trying to get back. Who knows if it's the car your high school flame that our dad drove, and you just want to recapture that in some way. That's the collector car hobby, right? There's all these factors that go into us pursuing or restoring a car. I mean, certainly I know that, but it's still it's an interesting world where we get to see these purchases on full display and then get to dissect them and try to get our heads around it. So we probably never will, but I think we've covered this one from every angle. So I'm going to say we can wrap up and look forward to next week, when hopefully we've got some more head scratchers to talk about. So this has been the commongear.com podcast. We are a digitized vehicle record management service. So if you have a car or truck that you're looking to preserve the history on in a digital format, so you never have to worry about losing that folder of vital records, hop on over to thecommongear.com, and we'll be glad to have you sign up for a free account and begin scanning and saving the records for your enthusiast grade car or truck. And every week, my colleague John, our third wheel Lars, who's off this week, we join here on YouTube to discuss 3 interesting or high watermark sales from the popular digital auction formats that are out there today, that being Cars and Bids and Bring a Trailer. So visit us each week where we have these conversations, and feel free to weigh in the comments below if you have any thoughts about what we've covered here. So thanks for watching, and we will see you back here next week.